Well, hello there, Vixens, and welcome to another episode of the Vixen Voice. So, as you know, I'm excited every time I talk to you, but today I'm really excited because we have my friend Michaela Alexis here. She and I have not spoken in a bit because she took a hiatus for the second part of her bio, which is being a girl mom. And so we haven't chatted in a bit, so I'm so excited to catch up with her, connect, and see what she's up to these days. So, Michaela is a millennial LinkedIn expert. She helps you optimize your profile. She helps you get content out there. If you were not following her on LinkedIn, go follow her now. What I love is Michaela not only gets a lot of likes, but she gets a lot of engagement. So I think for many of us, we struggle to really start those conversations, which is the powerful part of social media. And Michaela is so good at that. And as you're going to see, she just has amazing energy and she's a beautiful human being. So today we're going to get into a little bit of her journey. I'm sure she will have some tips for you how you can show up better on LinkedIn. And we're just going to see where this journey takes us. So Michaela, welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. I think that might have been the best intro that I've ever heard about myself. I'm gonna keep that recording, and anytime I'm having a bad day, I'm just gonna replay it. That was great. Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. We will take it. Well, as I told you, I like to keep it casual and just speak from the heart because the whole purpose here is for you to have your voice. And so hopefully in our conversation today, we're going to inspire other women. We're going to share with them our challenges. I'm also a little nervous about today, but excited as well because Michaela and I are going to dive into some topics that I'm not quite comfortable with. So I love that we're going to expose that because it's a little crazy what's happening. By the way, Michaela's coming to us from Canada, and this is happening in Canada too. But I feel like a lot of places free speech is under attack, and for me, that's so important. And so, Michaela's going to challenge me on some things I don't really like today. And I love having these conversations because it will potentially open my mind to something new, and I hope yours as well. Or it might solidify how I feel about something. I mean, we don't really know the outcome, right? But I really think if we're not having important discussions, and I mean, what we're talking about today isn't super life changing, don't get me wrong. But I think, anytime you feel uncomfortable with a topic, like talking about it helps you work out how you really feel and what you really think. So today, not just will we learn about Michaela's journey of leaving her corporate career, going to a business and then the solopreneur, and now becoming a girl mom and managing business while her husband's traveling for work a lot. But we will talk about some of these topics that, as I'm sharing with you, I might be a little uncomfortable with. So I hope that encourages you to engage into these topics. And the other thing is, Michaela, I'd love to start out by sharing how we met. So we met on LinkedIn, right?
We did, which is so serendipitous. It's perfect.
Yes, everything comes full circle. So I met Michaela because I was, scrolling LinkedIn. And one thing I'll share with y'all we're talking about today is I'm not a lover of LinkedIn, right? I know that my audience is at LinkedIn. I'm not sure why I don't love it so much. Michaela does. And, it might be because I was a financial advisor for 15 years, a lawyer before that. So it could be what shows up in my feed. Because, I was just talking to a woman the other day who loves LinkedIn, right? And obviously Michaela does. So anyway, I was on LinkedIn for some purpose. I can't remember. And Michaela's post popped up. A friend of mine had liked it. And Michaela, in this post, you were sharing about your journey with in vitro and something about your energy and your story. I was like, oh, let me check this out. So for everyone listening, this is insane because I don't have children. I don't plan to have children. I never planned to have in vitro. Like, I can't really relate to the fact that she was having in vitro, but I think all of us as women can relate to struggling with these issues that are particular to us, right? And so I was like, oh, this woman's beautiful. She's sharing the story. I like her vibe. Let me check her out. And then I went and saw that she coached business owners like me on how to use LinkedIn better. And as I shared, I struggle with LinkedIn. So, I mean, I think I pretty much hired you like that. Thank goodness I got you
Yeah.
right before maternity leave.
Yes, I think it was our last session was 3 days before I gave birth, which is crazy.
Yes. So I have to admit, Michaela helped me to love LinkedIn and see its value. I definitely see its value. You know, we're still struggling with how we show up on LinkedIn. So I hope to learn more today. But, you know, I just wanted to share how I was attracted to her, and that is the power of her content and how she shows up. I mean, I literally hired her probably the same day to coach me on LinkedIn because I loved that she was showing up so real, right? So Michaela, let's start there. Like,
Yeah.
you know, what's kind of your philosophy behind content and how you show up?
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating our like how we met just because in vitro is not something that you've considered. But I think that we as people are attracted to people that have the courage to share some of these vulnerabilities. And I think that there is, I don't want to say that there's a secret sauce, but I think that there is definitely a difference between vulnerability and oversharing. I think vulnerability
Yes.
is when you are sharing a piece of your heart, but you're also kind of giving a reason why it matters to the audience. So, like, that was a post about in vitro, but it had bigger lessons behind it that whether you were female and child free by choice or you were a male about to retire, you could still relate to some of those overall lessons. And I think that's really important. Sometimes when you see something on LinkedIn where it's like, oh, you know, I just got divorced, and it's kind of like this boohoo post, and there's no lessons, there's no why it matters for the person reading. That's when you get that like, ugh, because you feel like you have to comfort that person. And when somebody shares vulnerability in a way that feels true and authentic, you feel empowered versus kind of powerless in that situation when it's oversharing. So I think that like at the core of it, that's the main difference. And I share a lot of that content. I almost think of it as like pre-qualifying people, right? Because I want people that, even if they're not doing it currently, are attracted to the idea of showing up as themselves in the world. So that's why, like, that content is actually really great sales content because it led me to somebody like you who, yes, we might have different life circumstances, but in terms of our core beliefs, they're actually very, very similar. And those are the people that I want to work with. I mean, I worked in the corporate world where you had to work with anybody and everybody. So one of the benefits of being a business owner is that you can work with the people that you want to. And LinkedIn is a really great place to find those people that share those core beliefs. And when that happens, as you like, hopefully your experience with me has proven, is that it's fun. Like, chatting is just, it's fun. The work feels easier when you are aligned. And so that's something that's really important to me. So that's, my marketing brain is like, yes, there's those like hard sales pitches on LinkedIn. And I think that some of that stuff is really important in terms of converting, but also using LinkedIn as, again, like the world's largest networking event and just shaking hands with people and seeing what happens. That's what we basically did, is like, I shook your hand and then we just had a conversation. And so I think that also kind of rethinking LinkedIn like that really helps people to get over that, well, I don't know what to share. It's like, well, what would you share if you went to a networking event? You'd probably talk about the cheese platter. You'd probably talk about these little things that may not seem significant, but help to kind of build a relationship with somebody.
I love it. So there's so much in what you just shared. So one, I've already learned something because, as I shared with you, one of the things that turned me off from LinkedIn was every time I was logging on, I was getting these boo-hoo stories, which is crazy because your story attracted me and the other ones didn't. So I think you really hit home on the difference between the two. And so I think if someone's sharing content, just, which is, I mean, I remember taking a public speaking class when I was 12 years old, and it's like, who's your audience? What's your message? What's the purpose,
message?
Right?
Yeah, what's the purpose?
And this is like, the basics of
Yep.
communication.
Yep.
So it's no different. I think, I like this because I'm kind of having an aha moment because all these new things come up. Like, we haven't ventured onto TikTok yet. I will share the first time I opened TikTok, I watched stupid, crazy videos for 2 hours and annoyed the heck out of my friends sending them to them. Like, I
It's
mean,
a black
it's
hole.
like highly entertaining. Yes, and
Mm-hmm.
thank goodness it was a night I needed that, right? But sometimes we're so turned off, but we forget that it's just the basics of communication.
Yep.
So even though you're sharing your story for a purpose to help other people. So,
Right.
which, that's one thing I always say. If I'm going to show up, what value am I bringing to the audience?
Right.
It could be an audience of one, it could be however many people are listening to this podcast. But what value do I want to bring? Which I imagine is behind the purpose of your story. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so when I was little, I used this analogy of like, I never used to take pills. I hated pills. Like, I would not
Yeah.
swallow them. So my mom would put it in strawberry jelly and then she would spoon feed me the pill. And I think the same thing is true for LinkedIn. So you can have a really important message, but you can't just like shove it down somebody's throat. You have to use these like personal stories to show, hey, I understand you. I've been where you are. And even if it's not about you, maybe it's about a client that you've worked with, maybe it's about a stranger that you met. Those stories are important for the person to be like, oh, wait, they understand me. Now I'm going to listen. Because if you don't,
Yeah.
and I think that people kind of fall into two categories. Either they have the boohoo story where it's like this story about themselves and they never bring it back to the audience, or the opposite of that is like, I'm a financial advisor, here's the things that you need to know about managing your money. And it's like both ways don't work because they have to work together. It's in combination that's like that really powerful formula, because without that, we're not going to listen to the message, or we're not going to understand why we should care. So you don't want to fall into those two categories. And I truly believe, I mean, people will look at some of my content and be like, well, you're a writer. My mom was a teacher, so like she drilled it into me. So yes, I was always like a public speaker, my brother's an author, all of those things. But the reason that I teach what I teach is because I truly, in my heart, believe that communication is a skill and it's not a talent. And if you can kind of wrap your head around the fact that you can read books on communication, you can hire a coach, you can practice and get better. Just like going to the gym, you go running for the first time and you're winded and it's a whole mess. And that's the same thing with writing and with communicating. It's going to be messy in the beginning, but you get better. If you guys like really like don't believe me, go look at some of my very first articles because I've never taken them down. It's on my LinkedIn profile.
I love
And
it.
they're just awful because even though I knew how to write and I was in university, I was really bad at writing for social media. And I leave them up there because I want people to see that there's a progression. And that progression came from me just learning my craft, getting better, trying to figure out what are the little formulas that are really attracting people. So now I feel like really lucky because I'm able to say like, no, I'm not a unicorn. Like these are all things that you can do if you want to. And I think that most people should want to, even if it doesn't feel super fun at the moment. When it comes to LinkedIn, I always tell people it's like there are so many ways to create content on LinkedIn. Don't do it in ways that don't feel fun to you. So like if you don't like doing video, don't do video. Go and do like newsletters scare a lot of people, but are a lot of the people that are listening, are they marketers? Or are they business owners that do like
It's
email
a
marketing?
smorgasbord. So,
Cool.
yes, we'll have business owners. We also have just people, women in leadership
Amazing.
positions in general. So, all across the board.
Okay,
Yes.
so most people that are listening probably have some sort of form of email marketing in their role, whether it's a press release that they're sending out, newsletter, whatever it may be. LinkedIn actually has a newsletter feature. So if you are already creating newsletters through your organization, please go on LinkedIn, give the newsletter feature a try. You can like set up your profile so that you have a subscribe button so people visiting your profile can actually subscribe to your newsletter. And
Yeah.
the way that it displays is so beautiful. It's in whatever your inbox is. I use Gmail, and it's not like a little snippet. It shows your entire post in their inbox. So LinkedIn has created all of these new features that no matter where your comfort lies, whether it's email marketing, video, photos, polls, documents, there is a way that you can share that information like across the board. So I think that like exploring some of those new features is really important. I'm like so big on newsletters right now. I'm huge.
Yeah. I love your newsletter, by the way. So definitely go check out Michaela, check out our newsletter. Everything's in the show notes. So if you're listening to us on iTunes, Google, or Spotify, you can go to vixengathering.com on the podcast page. All the show notes, all the links to everything we're talking about, it's all there for you. So you definitely want to check it out because Michaela's going to share a really cool free resource too before we get off. So again, I want to circle back. I know we wanted to talk about your journey as entrepreneur, but this is fascinating because I'm learning as we're on here. So I'm getting free coaching.
Yes.
Thank you. So I like to do one free coaching session on the Vixen Voice a week. So now I see this is why you put things out there, right? You get them back. So, no, I love this because, you said something. I love to focus on the benefits of owning a business. So my best friend, I interviewed her for the podcast. She's an event planner. And it was interesting because she'd never articulated this to me. It's my best friend. But one of the things she loves about having her own business is when you work for someone else, she shared how there's a ceiling on how much you can earn, but there's also often a ceiling on the relationship you can have with people.
Yes.
Because there's that line of professionalism, right? And she really gets to know and loves a lot of her clients. So now that they're her clients, she can be friends with them on a deeper level where she couldn't when she was working under someone else's umbrella.
I love that.
Yeah, and you pointed out a benefit of it is getting to work with people you like. So I think that's incredibly important.
The fact that you can say no to certain people, and it's very rare that that happens because I think I try to put out as much information about who I am online as possible, so there's no surprises. But yeah, there has been times where I've talked to somebody and I've been like, this is not the right fit. Whether they're trying to I want to have X amount of followers. I know there's lots of reasons, but and sometimes it's just a communication thing where it just didn't feel right. That flexibility to be able to just like you're saying, I had clients that congratulated me and sent me flowers when I gave birth. I mean, that just does not happen when you work under someone's umbrella. And to me, that is probably the ultimate benefit is I love what I do, and I actually missed it. I see my friends that are on maternity leave and they're counting down the days because they have to go back to work, and I'm like, I can't wait. I was just so excited because it doesn't feel like work for me. So
yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, thank you. And, so talking about attracting people and that's also, another aha I had here is I personally, I don't like networking events. You're going to go drink cheap wine.
Yeah.
I don't eat cheese. I'm dairy free. Right? So I'm sitting there for an hour and maybe I'll meet one person who's interesting or something else, right? Whereas in my financial practice, I'd give a dinner seminar and I have a room full of people that want what I'm talking about. They want to be educated, right? And so then some of them would self-select to come in and some would self-select to become a client, but it was a pool of qualified potential clients, right? Whereas you go to networking events, unless it's specific niche, you don't have that. And, personally, I love my friends and family, and I'd rather be spending that time with them or having some quiet time to myself. But the aha I had is with LinkedIn being the world's largest networking platform, you can choose who you interact with on LinkedIn. So you can search for the people, or just like how I was attracted to you and your energy and your story. Well, then we went deeper in the conversation, right?
Yes.
And, a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to someone on LinkedIn, Darren Palatina. Maybe you've seen, they've kind of blown up, and check him out. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And I reached out because you you were still on maternity leave, and I just wanted a done for you optimized LinkedIn page. And I reached out to him because that's part of what they do. And he talked me through, and he was like, April, I just don't think you need to hire me. Like, I think you need to do this, this, and this. And it was such a valuable, deep, good conversation. And this is a person I respect, and hopefully we form a friendship with. And I mean, you're in Canada, he's in the UK. But, you know, it was a very real conversation. It was very much like that networking scenario where are we a good fit? Can we do something together? What are you doing? What am I doing? This is super cool. So, you know, I'm going to make more effort to do that more, even though I was looking to hire them directly and that wasn't what came out of it. Like just reaching out to people I find interesting. And, you know, I have done that in the past, and sometimes people don't respond, and that's okay too. Like, that's the person who at the networking event gives you the cold shoulder and walks off. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I also think, like, one thing that people don't use nearly enough are hashtags on LinkedIn. So if you're looking either to hire somebody or you just want to have deeper conversations, like I talked to somebody the other day, and we had an hour set, and we ended up talking for 2 hours just geeking out about LinkedIn. And it was like such a relief, because it's like, I've been wanting to like talk to somebody that cares, and my dogs don't care, my toddler doesn't care. And so, like, I think using those hashtags to either find things that you're interested in, or what you're looking to hire, or content that you just want to know more about. You know, before this call, we were talking about AI. If that's something that you're like, that's piquing my interest, but I don't know what I don't know yet, then maybe you should look up those hashtags and make sure that you're following certain things. Look up LinkedIn pages that you can follow to get more tips and tricks about that thing. Connect with people. So when you look up hashtags, because there's creator mode, so at the bottom, like, or at the top of your profile, you can choose like the things that you talk about, and you can include 5 hashtags. You can actually connect with people that talk specifically about whatever that thing is that you're interested in. So that's like one little hack. I mean, I'm like you, like, we're very similar in that I don't like wasting my time. My time costs a lot of money, and I think anybody that's listening is like, yeah, great, LinkedIn is awesome. Very overwhelming. You can go on, do a million things. It's like, there's a lot of benefits of that, but the downfall is, like, if you're a business owner, you don't have, you know, usually a team of people that can just do everything for you. So you're doing a lot of the marketing, the business development, all of that stuff. So we have to find ways to cut through the noise. Hashtags is a really great way to do that. Looking at groups that you can join is a really great way to do that. Looking at people that you're already connected to and seeing who they're connected with. That's a big one. I have found so many interesting people just by being like, wait a second, we have 100 people in common. Who are you? Right? So those are like just little ways that you can do that. Also, collaborative articles is another thing. So collaborative articles, you can look up whatever topic that you're interested in, and then look at what people are contributing. You're going to find experts in that field. So if you're looking for somebody that can help you with copywriting on social media, look for articles on LinkedIn, collaborative articles on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the link so that you can include it in the show notes so that people can really dive into this. But you'll see all of these experts that are sharing their thoughts on these topics, and that is one of the greatest, like, little hidden gems where you can connect with those people that are already doing really great work in whatever that field is. So there's little secrets on LinkedIn, and I'm always like, how can I work as smart as possible on this platform, because I don't have the time, right?
Well, that's totally important. I mean, and I love that you said my time is valuable, because that's one thing I coach the female entrepreneurs I work with is, what is your hourly rate? And if you don't know your hourly rate, you have to. And one, you know, it helps you to charge, which I want to talk about pricing and how I hired you. We'll come back to that. But one, it helps you know how to price and value your time. But two, it helps you know what to say yes and no to, right? Like, if this is the rate of my time. I mean, you know, I've had so many clients who are like, Gosh, I talked to a housekeeper and, it's going to cost me like half my hourly rate to hire someone to clean my house for a few hours. And then I have 3 more hours with my daughter or to work on business or
Right.
to spend however
Yes.
I want,
Yes.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I really think knowing your hourly rate is the key to leveraging your time. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more to it. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so important, and I'm emphasizing this because I don't know if you experience this, but a lot of my clients, they don't have a revenue goal, they don't have an income goal. Like I can't get we get their hourly rate down, but I have to walk them through the process because there's so much guilt around money
For
or
sure.
shame or discomfort or
Yeah.
limiting beliefs. And
Yeah.
it's so important. Like you're in business to make money so that your
Yeah.
family can have a good life, right?
I
And you're also in business for other things.
yeah.
But I mean,
I think that to me, like right now, my clientele is about 99% women. Don't know how it
yes.
happened, but I
Yeah.
freaking love it. I started working with this amazing PR/medium from California, and she has all these clients
Love
that are
it.
women in leadership roles. So I speak to women all day long. And I think that there is this overall belief that women is like the word woman is synonymous with sacrifice. Like we
Mm-hmm.
should set
Yes.
ourselves on fire, and if somebody needs something from us, whether it's our kids, our spouse, our neighbors, or the person that's in our inbox sucking up our time, we need to say yes. And
Right.
I'm going to give you a little hack because I am a
Okay.
people pleaser through and through. There
Yeah.
is this, and we've talked a little bit about AI. There is an AI tool, a Chrome extension. It costs like $10 a month or something like that. It's called Ellie, Ellie. This is going to be your best friend. It is amazing. So it responds to emails for you. So basically, you literally, like, it lives in your
Nice.
inbox. It will read the message that was sent to you. You will choose the tone of the response, whether you want it to be friendly, not so friendly, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
more professional, more warm. You choose those things. And then you choose whether you're interested or not interested. And it will give you a draft of how to say no to that person. And I am telling you, it is
I love
an
it.
absolute gift. I am like, I because it takes away some of the guilt too, right? It's like I didn't do it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying no. I'm using this tool, and it does it in such a great way where it doesn't feel like no, not interested, which is, by the way, totally fine if you want to do that. But if you're like me where you don't want to necessarily close the door forever, you can
Yep.
have something that will draft a response that will keep that door open that says like, this doesn't really work for me right now, but let's touch base in 6 months from now. So you can
I
actually
like it.
add details into the tool that say not interested, but in 6 months have them check back with me. And it will create a response for you. So you can use that also. A lot of like people don't know this, but you can use that on LinkedIn,
Right.
right? Because if you have your LinkedIn inbox, you could just copy
Ah.
and paste it into the tool and just be like not interested, right? And then you could just use that as a template. So that's my little
I like
secret
it.
that I've been using. And it's really, really helped me say no. Also, having a
Yeah.
child helps you say no too because it's like, oh, I just don't have the time anymore, so I'm okay with saying no. It's funny how that
Yeah.
happens, but yeah, I think that there's definitely with my clients at least, it's like there's like 50 people in my inbox that want something from me. I'm like, and you don't like if it's going to cost you money, like you don't do it, right? You don't need to sacrifice yourself every single day.
Well, and I agree. And I think, this is why having your avatar client or whatever you want to call your ideal client really defined and constantly working on that is so important, which I think is behind a lot of your messaging because, like you
Yeah.
said, you're trying to attract people that you like and you want to work with, right? And sometimes we want to work with someone, but we can't give them value. So, like, one thing we're learning in the Vixen gathering is, we're working with female entrepreneurs, specifically Gen X, because they're dealing with like aging parents, having kids at home. There's a lot of
Mhm.
other issues that are kind
Mhm.
of, it's called the sandwich generation. And I'm a
Mhm.
Gen Xer. So, like, I understand. But at first we're like, hey, looking to scale your business to 1 million, work with us. Well, now I've learned that if you're really a startup, I don't necessarily have the skill set to fully help you, right?
Yeah.
So now I've changed it if you're scaling from 6 figures to 7. And that has nothing to do with me not wanting to work with these women and
No,
help
it's,
them, because
yeah.
I want to help all of them. But I don't think I'm the best person to work with them,
Yep.
right? So it
Yep.
goes two ways. Like, who do you want to work with and who do you serve best? And
Yeah.
I just share that because I think we constantly have to be looking at our messaging and who our ideal client is and how we show up and seeing if it needs to tweak, because we learn things. Like, I'm sure you learn from those 50 messages, the 25 that you need to say no to teaches you a lesson, right? And then you're like, how do I put this up front in my messaging so that I don't get this in the back
Right,
end, right?
right. That's a big thing. I think that, like, definitely when it comes to LinkedIn, as boring as it may sound, optimizing your profile is really going to help determine what kind of messages end up in your inbox. Like,
Yeah.
if you are getting, people signing up for sessions with you without speaking to you, that to me is like the ultimate indicator that you are on the right page. And when I listen to clients that are like, my inbox is just full of junk, my first thought is like, what's broken? Like,
Yeah.
what in the messaging is broken that people think that this is something that you're interested in? You're always going to have spam, and that's
Yeah.
normal. But are you still getting some messages from people that you want to hear from? Because if not, let's take full responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
everything that we put out online, rather than being like, this platform sucks, or this. There are
Yeah.
benefits to every single social media platform. That's why they're so popular, right? So we need to find those benefits and decide if it's a right place for us. So I
Yeah.
think that that's a big one for me.
Well, and this circles back to one thing I wanted to share when we were first talking about how we met is, honestly, you could have told me whatever price you wanted. Like, I already knew I was hiring you. You know what
Right.
I mean? So that's why it's so important to know who you serve, how you serve them, and make sure it's in your messaging.
Yeah.
And again, we're still struggling with this. I'm a new company, like getting that messaging out there, and we
Mm-hmm.
focus more on Instagram because I wanted one focus. So now, don't be surprised if I'm hiring you again to come coach us on LinkedIn, because what we have stopped doing is outsourcing, because we're a
Okay.
purpose-driven company, and my team and I are so passionate about the message and what we do that we want to do it, but we want an expert like you guiding us,
I
right? So
love that.
that we do it in the best way possible to show up and
Yeah.
bring value to our clients. But I just think when you get it right and you have the right fit client, I'm not saying you can charge whatever you want, but like,
Mm-hmm.
again, if we circle back, you talk about sacrificing with women, and I find I do a lot of coaching with my clients, and I had to do this when I moved from financial services to coaching, because when I was a lawyer in financial services, I never had to ask anyone to pay me. I got paid automatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we invested something, I got paid on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had to learn how to actually ask for the check. That was the skill
It's a
set
lot.
when I
It's a lot.
switched to
Yeah.
coaching, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could all day long tell you my value and what I could do for you, and I had a super high closing rate in the financial industry, but I never had to ask them to write me a check. That was
Mm-hmm.
a whole different skill set I had to learn when I
Mm-hmm.
switched to being a coach full time. And so a lot of times I'm working, but what I share with them is, when it's a right fit and you can show the value, people don't care about the price. Like, I sometimes have to ask people on the end of a call, hey, do you want to know how much this is? Like,
I do
and
the
it's
same. Yeah.
right. And it's in our head, like, oh my gosh, they want to know the price. Am I charging too much? And so I just kind of encourage you, get out of your head,
Mm-hmm.
focus on the value you're going to bring and what you deliver, and getting that right fit client. And
Yeah.
you're giving us great tips for that. And when you do that, price kind of becomes irrelevant. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you agree with that, Michaela.
As we're talking, I'm like, the one thing that was so terrifying for me when I started my own business was narrowing down. Like, I'm like sweating
Yeah.
just thinking about it, because it's like, it's so terrifying. And again, I don't know if it goes back to this like need to please and sacrifice and all this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
of like saying, this is my ideal client, like I had to be like, I don't do social media, I do LinkedIn. I remember that day being like, oh my God, but what if, like, what if this doesn't work out? And now I'm like, I'm very open with saying, like, I work
Yeah.
really well with like business owners and women. That's a scary one for me too, because it's
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, I'm cutting out a whole demographic. But I had a friend that told me, he's like, Michaela, as you grow, you're going to have to alienate some people.
You do.
That's just part of the process. And there's almost like a value that comes along with doing that, because the more you can narrow down, say, like, I love working with female business owners. Well, what happens when you do that is, like, I've spent the last since February, I've been working directly with female business owners, and what happens?
Yeah.
Your expertise goes up because you're working with those
Yes.
people day in, day out. So now you're not just an expert, you're a specialist, and there is a premium to being a specialist. So it's one of those things that is like, I'm sure that somebody is like listening and is like, you need to narrow down your ideal client, but you're like, I don't want to do it because there's so much fear behind it. But it is 100% one of those things that I had to do, and it's probably the best thing that I did in my business.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when I was working with you, you put that you were a millennial. By the way, I dated
that was another
myself
one.
by saying write the check, right? You're a millennial. You're probably like, what's a check, right? Like, I've had employees, I'm like, hey, I need your check for direct deposit. I don't have checks, right? So I'm totally like dating myself, but turn over their money in whatever fashion it should be, right? Like the exchange of energy.
E-transfer.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so from that, I actually put Gen X in my LinkedIn title, what was it, 2 years ago when we were working together, and it really had nothing, but you're right. You get to know your clients. So I work with Gen X female entrepreneurs because they have a certain set of problems, issues, things they're overcoming. And because, what we do is a mastermind where we all come together in a retreat, they can relate to each other better because they are going through the same things, right?
Yeah.
And, it's like, if you have 3 million of revenue, that's awesome. I had that in my old company too, but that's not this group because there's a different set of parameter scaling from, 100,000 to 1 million than there is when you're doing 3 million of revenue, right? Or 10 million. There's like different subsets. And so, I know I've been told I need to say, okay, but are you working with financial entrepreneurs? Are you working with because I love working with creative entrepreneurs too, because they need a lot of help on the business part, right? But what they do is so amazing. And so I need to niche down a little bit more too. But we haven't gone there yet.
It's scary. But you gave me marketing goosebumps, like when you were talking about, like, it's just, there is, like you're saying, so much magic, and no matter what industry you're in, whether it's financial, creative, I always tell people, I'm like, there's a lot of people that cry during my sessions. I'm teaching people how to optimize their LinkedIn profile, but no matter what we're doing, whether it's in business and personal, everything is personal because we are human beings. Any experiences that we have in the world are going to, I'm sure that you know this, money is emotional, right? Like there is just no way of separating them. And so you being able to like niche down and say like, okay, I understand the skills that you need, but I also get what it's like to be a Gen X female. That does really make a big difference for a lot of people. And again, going back to like the spoonful of strawberry jelly, being able to relate to that person before you dive into here's what you need to know, I think is crucial for most people. I think even if somebody hires you and they're just trying to like go through the motions, until you can share your story and say, hey, I understand what you're doing, I understand what you're going through, people are just not going to listen.
No, it's true. And, women are so relationship and community based. That's like one of our superpowers. So you're so right. Like with my clients, we're so deep and we talk about everything.
Right.
And then it was so funny yesterday. So I don't know if you know this, but I do spiritual healing as well. So I actually went through a very deep healing 2 weeks ago. And most people don't know, but there's 5 levels we heal on, like mental, physical, cellular, spiritual, and emotional. And so sometimes you think you've healed, where it kind of comes back and bites you in the butt later. And so I had this really deep healing, and I got divorced in 2009. I'm like, oh, I'm healed over that. Like I worked out others. Well, something bubbled up that was still there. And so yesterday I'm on a call with, I have a consultant right now on digital ads teaching us how to do Facebook ads, right? And he's very much a man, like he's a man's man. And he's like, April, how's your day going? I'm like, I'm kind of going through it today because I'm so used to my female clients.
Right.
And he's like, what's going on? And He's like, what's going on? I was like, oh, well, yeah, some issues from my divorce from 10 years ago are popping up because I had a spiritual healing. And I just see his face.
Yeah,
and he's
like,
what?
I'm not
Like,
qualified.
and then I was like, but it's okay. I'm here. We're going to talk business. Let's go. Like I
love it.
rescued the situation, but like this is a conversation I have all the time with my clients,
Yeah.
them sharing with me and me sharing with them.
Yeah.
And it's so nice because we always just get to be our integrated selves. And that's, women are so multi-layered and multifaceted.
Yeah.
And I love like uncovering those layers and getting to know them. And, so now that's also like, I'm looking at, okay. And I have a male business coach and we're great friends. And I could have totally had that conversation with him and he would have been like, cool, tell me more.
Yeah.
So you start, I see it from being a client of people. Like I want to work with people that I can just be myself all the time.
Yeah. You don't have to be on. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's not oversharing, but if you ask me, like, how's your morning going, I don't want to BS you. I'm just not that type of person. Right?
And I think it's important, too, because, as for me, being a coach, I need to know what state of mind you're in before we dive in. If you're having a really rough day, I'm going to approach you very differently versus somebody that's like, I'm ready, Michaela, let's go. Then we're going to maybe I'm going to push you a little bit more. I'm going to be more assertive. I'm going to challenge you more. So my energy is going to depend on where you're at that day. And I don't know if I haven't really explored it. I don't know if men do that, but women are really good at taking those cues and then being okay, how can I deliver this message in a way that's going to resonate with you today?
So what I have experienced with men, because actually I love working with men, so it's really weird for me at first to only work with women, because especially I did retirement planning, so I was mainly working with couples, and
right.
and I had a lot of single male clients, because what I understood is I did, even in the financial industry, I had that same approach. Like you said, money is very emotional. So it's like, tell me about your goals, tell me about your dreams, tell me about your fears, because that's all tied up. If you have a good financial plan that kind of makes them feel better, it's even better, right? And so, so what I did experience is men love to be in the other seat of that conversation, but I agree with you. There's some of them skilled at having it. There's some of them not.
Right.
And so I went to it was a client service expo, I think in 2018, it was before the pandemic, 2018 or 19. And, it was outside of what I normally do. I said, oh, I like the speaker. I'm going to go to this. And there was this one session on how women are now, this is again, before the pandemic, I think it's higher now, making 83% of financial decisions for a household. And yet advertising and marketing is still catering more to the more the client experience. I think advertising and marketing has adapted to women, but the actual client experience has not adapted to women. And so I was like, oh, well, this is what I do because I'm a woman. This is the process I have. And what they talked about is when you cater to women, the men like it too. And they want to go along that journey too, right? You might get the wall to begin with. So I don't know. We got way off track here, but that's the fun of interviews.
No, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think this is what we're doing today. And and that's why it's fascinating to me that women have so many limitations when it comes to money that I find, because it's so critical that we remove those blocks, because they are increasingly in charge of household finances and making decisions and taking care of things. And I think it's bringing a lot of stress. That's what I see often. So if we can, and like you said, writing's a skill. Handling finances and making financial decisions, setting income and revenue goals, that's a skill. You just have to flex your muscle and do it.
And I think that goes for pretty much everything. You're seeing more female creators. There are so many, and different ways women are stepping into leadership roles, but it's not an easy thing. You really can't just read a book and then you're okay, I know how to be a leader in my life. It's messy and it's a bumpy road. I know it has been for me, the things that I've learned over the past few years. So I love this conversation. This is fantastic.
No, I'd love to talk about that more, which is interesting because it is important to have vulnerability as a leader. We're out of the old school leadership model, right? But then again, there's that fine line of where's
Sure.
the vulnerability. And as a leader, here's what I find. I had this weird experience where in 1 week, my personal trainer and my housekeeper both told me they loved me. And like they were just calling me in the middle of the day. And I was like, what? Like, what is going on here? Right. And I had to analyze and see that I actually was oversharing or being very open. And so when I needed to be in professional mode, people were not respecting that boundary. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense? When
Yeah.
I had to go to work. And
Yeah.
so I had to adjust how I was showing up for people to help put that boundary. And I feel like leadership is such a tightrope
It
of
is.
exactly what we're talking about, right?
It
like
is.
how am I vulnerable, but how do I not overshare so that it's not too much? Or I don't know. I think that's one of the challenges in today's world.
It's going to be an increasing challenge, I think, for a lot of people because the lines between like work or personal and professional selves are really becoming blurred. For me, it's really been understanding the difference between I am a business versus I run a business. And that was like a hard
Yes.
lesson that I learned in the beginning where I would just, like you're saying, like have all these relationships and I would think that everybody had my best interests. And
Yeah.
I had a really awful experience with a client, and it was like almost immediately when I first started, where they kind of took advantage of the fact that I was like, this is my first contract and this is my first deposit. And it's like no
Yeah.
contract at all, you know? So it was like, it was a whole mess, and it made me cry. And then, you know, I talked to my friends about it, and I had a friend that immediately was a lawyer, and she's like, we're working on a contract together. And so it really became like, it's like, yes, we can have these heart to heart conversations, but I'm going to tell you right now, you're signing this contract and you're going to know
Yeah.
what's expected from you, what's expected from me. We're going to set those expectations so that we have that. We set it aside and now we can go have fun, but we're not just going to have fun. And then on LinkedIn, my strategy is really sharing a lot of those heart to heart conversations with my content. But if you look at my my personal profile, it's very branded, right? I have like my profile photo that's professional. I have my background image that's professionally designed. I've got that consistency on my page. Everything looks like kind of like a mini version of a website. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of how I steer a lot of my clients, where it's like, yes, we can have those conversations, but you have to remind people, hey, I also run a business and I'm also a professional. So that's kind of like the way that I tiptoe that balance. Like you can still have fun, but you also want to make sure the fun stops really fast when there's that line that's blurred, where
Yep.
you think that every client is your friend. They're your client first. Friend
Yep.
second, client first. And I think that on both sides, for me at least, having a contract that's in place and having those expectations set really early on has always helped my relationships, where I can say, hey, this is what my schedule looks like for the next month.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to deliver to you. Like you'll notice that on my calendar, it's like, I'm going to send you a document. You're going to get it within 48 hours. Once I set those expectations, I think that helps the person too, where they're not like, trying to figure out what to expect. So, but it's a balance. It's not an easy thing, and I think it's going to become a lot more challenging as
Yeah.
things progress.
Well, and when you have those clearly drawn, I have someone we're working with that like there's a piece missing, and my team and I just realized this yesterday. And we're like, okay, we don't know if this is our fault or their fault. Not that it's fault, but someone dropped the ball, right? And
Right.
we're not sure. But because we do have clearly defined terms, like that's our
Yeah.
first step to go step and say, okay, they were supposed to do this, we were supposed to do this. And then we have a great relationship with this partner, right?
Yeah.
So then it just becomes a conversation of how we fix it, not, even though I use that term, not whose fault it is,
Yeah.
because we had the clear expectations of who was supposed to do what. So, yeah, I totally agree with that, which these things happen. I mean, you have a lot of moving parts in
Yeah.
business these days, and, balls do get dropped, and you
Yeah.
have to figure out like where the problem is so you can solve it.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that laid out, it becomes harder. But no, I love that. I love that. So we're talking about, and what I love about this is I had 2 clients this week dealing with shame for different issues, like, stemming from their business. And so I love that we're sharing, like, hey, I've been there, I've had this pain, I've made mistakes, and I had to recalibrate or pivot or change. And I just think for some reason, a lot of times when I'm talking to my female clients, like there's such a level of, I have, I have to make this happen, or I have to be amazing, or I have to do things great. It's not quite perfectionism, but I get it, because it's like when I got divorced and I felt like I failed at the most important thing in life. I was like, I remember saying, I will not fail again. And for many years in my financial practice, I operated like, I'm not going to let my client's retirement plan fail, which was amazing for my client, but I was burning myself out, right? Because I was carrying that into my work. And so I think when we learn, to separate our emotions from business, or that other people have been there and done that. And yeah, it did feel crappy, but we fixed it and moved on. Like, I
Yeah.
guess what I'm trying to say is it's just a problem to share, because it breaks my heart when my clients have shame about something. Like, shame is a heavy emotion, right? Like,
It's
how do
heavy.
we, yeah.
I have shame with so before I started working solo, I ran my own little agency. I had partnered with my then bosses that brought me in and gave me a fancy
Mm-hmm.
title and a corner office and all of that. And to this day, you know what I'm thinking right now as we're talking? I'm like, I'm going to drink coffee out of my company mug, my old company mug. I'm going to do it today because you're so right. I mean, it's such a heavy, like, burden, and for anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, it probably is not this like shameful thing, but for me, like, just like
Yeah.
you're saying, I'm so used to kind of excelling at things that I do because I become so hyper focused on, like you're saying, like
Mm-hmm.
winning or like accomplishing
Right.
these goals. And so when you have something that's in your life that like just feels like, a sore spot, it's hard because it also carries into other things. That's a reason why I
Mm-hmm.
haven't hired people um
Mm-hmm.
as a solopreneur. I work with people, but like it's very like distant kind of contractor relationships where I don't want to necessarily manage people. And but there are so many lessons that I learned throughout that process that I can't
Mm-hmm.
hold on to that anymore. Like, I learned what I don't like. Like, that's the hard part, is like I had these dreams being an employee. I was like, I want to have the corner office. I want to have the title. I want to be in
Mm-hmm.
charge. I want to run my own business and have business partners and be like this big like businesswoman, and then having it, and then literally sitting in my corner office at like 8, 9 o'clock at night trying to grind away
Mm-hmm.
at something and just crying into my computer. That was necessary for me
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know what I want. Like the dream can change. And I think that sometimes we
Yeah.
get caught in like this, well, this has been my dream my whole life, so I
Mm-hmm.
need to stick it out. I always like say it's called a life, it's not a life sentence. So if you have
I
a
love it.
job or a role or you have a project that you wanted so badly, but then you end up having it and it feels like a nightmare, it's okay for
Yeah.
like that dream to change. And so this is a good conversation. It's actually very like I can see how you're a healer, because now I'm like, you know what, I need to drink. It's such a small thing, but I need to drink out of that coffee mug. It's like literally in my cupboard, and I
Yeah.
need to remember that the reason that I'm doing what I am now and that I love what I do is because I went through a process of being like, oh, I hate this and I need to like
Mm-hmm.
work for myself, and I
Mm-hmm.
I was able to find that because of that experience. So I think that's really important for people.
Yeah, I love that. And to reflect on those, one thing I love doing with my clients is making sure they know their three like strongest personal core values, not business related. And a lot of times in those moments is when you learn what your core value is, right? Like
Right.
what is being violated in this experience that
Mm-hmm.
I'm reacting to this
Mm.
level. So I have one. Well, she will be a client. She's in Europe now, and when she comes back, we're working together. And we were trying to define her core values, and when we did, like there was this aha moment where she had shame from a job she had walked out of, like just walked
Right.
out, like one day
That's what
just
it
had
is.
enough.
Yeah.
And then when we looked, they violated one of her three personal core values. So
Mm-hmm.
now she has a reason that she walked out the door. And like, it took away the shame. Again, you have to heal on many levels, but at least it was the beginning of the process. And it was almost became something she could become proud of. Like I was upholding my values
I love
versus
that.
having shame about, right?
I think that there's this idea too that I think a lot of shame happens when it comes to career pivots because we have this idea that it's a job, we shouldn't be emotional about a job. Which
Yeah.
is crazy because it's like you're going to grieve any chapter of your life that
Yes.
closes. And when we don't allow ourselves to grieve, okay, this is the identity that I thought that I wanted, to
Yeah.
be able to move on, that's when
Yeah.
trouble really happens. And I think that it's because of this shift of like, back in the day, it's like you would go in, you would log in, punch in on the computer, and then you start your day and then you log out. And that was it. Where now it's like, it's so integrated into who you are, your identity, how you see yourself in relation to other
Mm-hmm.
people. And when that ends, there has to be some sort of grieving, healing process. And there is trauma with jobs,
Yeah.
whether or not you were like
Yeah.
mistreated. Somebody, you mentioned with your divorce, maybe somebody triggered
Yeah.
something in you that you didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know existed. Or maybe it's just like your client where it's like, this is not for me. And it's
Yeah.
so funny that like we hold on to that and we make up all these stories of like how you gave up and like all of that and you
Right.
quit. And it's like, no, you chose yourself. And maybe kind of shifting the
Yes. I
conversation
love that.
to I chose myself rather than I quit that
Yes.
job, I think could be powerful. It's for me even right now. I'm like, no, I chose myself. I've
Yeah.
never considered it that way.
I love it. Well, there you go. Put it up there. No, I mean, it's so true what you're saying. And one thing, so Darren Hardy, I don't know if you know him, but he was a mentor of mine or kind of still is for a long time, since like 2012. And he says, you don't fire people, you liberate them back to the marketplace. Like, because
Oh, okay.
obviously it's not working on both ends,
Yeah,
right? So, but so many people like, a lot of shame can
the
come from
shame.
getting fired,
For
right? But
sure.
again, maybe
Huge.
you were being hard headed and staying on a path that
That
wasn't
wasn't right.
serving you,
Yep.
and now you've been open to it.
Oh,
But
I love that.
yeah, I love thinking
Oh,
of
I'm
that way.
getting
But
goosebumps. I'm gonna use
I,
that. I love that. You're like, and it's funny that you say that because I always tell
yeah,
people I started on LinkedIn as a job seeker, and then I ended up going viral, and then I landed
yeah,
this amazing job. But I always tell people I'm like, congratulations when they have been like let go or whatever, because it's just like you're saying, it's like you weren't on the right path. There's another
yeah,
path for you. There's another opportunity. It's just waiting for you. So let's get
yeah.
into
And
it.
no, I totally agree. And you were talking about emotions. So again, I could get on my stump, but I feel there's been a spiritual war against women and the femininity for a while. And I think part of that is you can't be emotional when it comes to business and work
Mm-hmm.
because we are emotional creatures. Like this is our superpower, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there was this, nope, not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's still like stuck in our heads. And then
Right.
we beat ourselves up.
For feeling
But
things.
yeah. And I think probably because you're working with mainly women and I work with all women, at first it feels weird, but then it's so beautiful being able to integrate all parts of yourself into your work and what you do. And, that's why, just like you, I mean, I have lots of male friends who are like, why can't you coach me? Why can't you come sit on my board of directors? And it's like, I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. And I mean, God basically told me he wanted me to work with women, right? Like, so this is something like it would be so easy, like you said, if I just said, okay, man, I'll work with you too. But
Right.
that was not the path laid out for me. But it's been this beautiful journey because we get to be ourselves. Like when
Mm-hmm.
we're at the Vixen Mastermind, people are talking about personal issues just as much as they are business or
Mm-hmm.
professional because it's all integrated, right? Especially for women because it's balancing your kids, your significant other, your husband, your job, and then there's so much guilt. I'm sure you've been through it the last few years, dropping off at daycare the first day. Like
Yeah.
there might have been mom guilt, there might not have been mom guilt. And I think you told me it felt kind of good and you felt guilty that it felt good,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
we can't
Always guilt.
win.
Yeah. Yeah. Always guilt. And you know what? This conversation has been mind blowing for me because for the longest time, I'm like, no, there's no such thing. Like at first I thought that there was such thing as a dream job. And then I was like, no, there's
Yeah.
no dream job. Like every job has its challenges. And now I'm thinking that a dream job is directly correlated to how much of yourself you can actually bring to whatever you do. Like that's giving me
Yes.
goosebumps because I'm like, that's it.
Yes.
That's it. Like, can you show up as yourself? Because if you can't, I know that like
Mhm.
most people listening have probably been in a job where they had to put on the mask and they, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, felt exhausted because it's like, this is not who I am. I'm just
Hmm.
trying to fit into the mold of whatever like
Yeah.
these people are making me and all of that stuff. And I think that's what a dream job is literally
Hmm.
just being able to like show up as yourself and be accepted. I remember like I think it was 2 weeks after I started my job and I had won like this huge contract with IHG Hotels in Crown Plaza, which was massive. And my
Yeah.
husband, we're getting into the car. He's like, Michaela, do you realize that you're getting paid right now to be yourself? And it was such a small
Oh.
thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting paid to be myself. And I think that's it. I think it's really
Yeah.
just that simple.
I love that notion of dream job because, again, we can get really spiritual with this because I believe we are put on earth for a purpose, which is why I pivoted and switched to the Vixen Gathering to help women like discover who they really are in that purpose. And it's not really discovering. You knew, like,
You know,
think back to your 18-year-old
I know.
self. She
Hmm.
knew damn well who she was,
Right.
right? And then we get responsibility and we get
Right.
socialized and we go
Yep.
to college and
Yep.
there's institutions telling
Yep.
us how to think. And then we start people pleasing
Yep.
and there's all these layers. And so now I'm 47 and I think I've ripped most of the layers off. Like I literally just ripped them off. I didn't even do it nicely, like layers.
Yep.
So the last few years have been crazy because I was just like, I'm over this. We're not doing this anymore, right?
Hmm.
But for other people, that's how I'm built. I can change quickly, and that's why I love coaching because
Hmm.
change is hard for so many people
It
that
is.
I can help them go at the pace they're comfortable with changing. But it's so funny. I just think we're put on earth for a
Yeah,
purpose,
I
and if
know.
you're not
I
being
agree.
yourself and you're not people, and if you're people pleasing, you're not here to live your husband's life. You're not here even to
Hmm.
live your daughter's life or your
Hmm.
parents' life. And
Hmm.
so, I really just encourage women, find out who you are and what you want. Like what you want is the key to your purpose. Yet we feel so guilty doing what we want, right? It's
Right.
what we should do or must do. So yeah, well, I can't wait to hear. So I've coached you, you've coached me. Like, hopefully the audience is getting as much out of this as we are.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I don't know if you knew this, but I actually went to
Huh.
university. My degree is in legal studies.
No, so funny.
Yeah, and I remember like I was supposed to take my LSATs and I
Yeah.
just had this moment of like panic where I'm like I need to book a flight to California. And I booked a flight to California. I ended up traveling with like my best friend and we just were in our 20s and just
Yeah.
had adventures. And it's so funny looking back on that now being like why was like I loved legal studies because I love stories. I loved like
Yes.
reading people's stories.
Yep.
And it's like I was literally just trying to find a loophole for doing exactly this where I'm like my parents will be okay with that one. But it's like I look back now I'm like I could never be a lawyer. Like it just doesn't make any sense for who I am, but I also understand why I
Yeah.
was attracted to that field as well.
Well, it's so funny because I was a litigator and I became a litigator, which is a courtroom attorney in the US for many of the same reasons. Like I wanted to tell stories and I wanted to learn new because every case you're learning
It's
something new,
fascinating.
right? So
Yeah.
if it's about car manufacture, I'm learning about that. And then the next week I might be learning about this
Yeah.
based on who my client is. Um, but it's interesting to me because looking back on being a lawyer, one, I think it'd be so freaking easy after running business, right? Because I mean, I thought it was like
Yeah.
everyone thinks it's so hard, and yes, you work a lot, but you have set things you're doing. And then number two, I'm like, what the heck was I doing? Because now I've taken all these assessments like Colby and different things, and I know how I'm built
Right.
and where my energy comes from.
Yeah.
And Working Genius is the newest one my team and I are doing. I've done Human Design with Kira Doyle, who was on the show. And like, I understand myself so well. And I was like, I would have burnt out so
Yeah.
quickly if I stayed in the
Yep.
legal field because like I'm a quick start. I like coming up with new ideas, starting things. Like I don't necessarily like finishing them. I don't like dealing with a lot of detail. I mean, I
Yes.
read this much every day as a lawyer. Like all I was doing
Is
was reading
details. Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah.
So, yes, if you're listening, please go take some assessment. I don't care what it is. Start learning who you are and how you're made, because that will help guide you. You know, I think what you want is the soft version of what you're supposed to be doing and then what your makeup is. And I know we are running way over time. So, we didn't even get to touch on AI and all these pending things. So, probably I'd love to chat with you again, Michaela.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I mean, from copywriting to AI to all of these things, like it literally could go on for days and days.
I love it. Okay, well, I have an idea for you, so I'll talk when we wrap up. But before we wrap up, you know, we are talking about serving women, and we've touched on how women are very multifaceted and multidimensional. So I always like to ask my guests, what does femininity look like to you? Like, when do you feel you're most feminine, right? Because it's different for all of us.
I feel my most feminine when I am, especially now as a new mom, when I am doing something that feels wholly for me. Right?
Oh,
So
I
like
love it.
being in
Yes.
California and being in the recording booth is probably my paradise because I'm focused and I am doing something that isn't for my husband, isn't for my daughter, isn't for my dogs. It is for me. And I think that that combined with also doing something that I really genuinely love and would probably do even if I wasn't being paid for it, those two combined, just there's something about it that just feels magical for me.
I love it. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And, you know, again, this is why I love asking this question because another new mom might have said when I spend time with my child or when I'm
Yeah,
with my girlfriends,
yeah,
and we're being real. Like,
yeah,
this is what drives us and who we are. And by you filling that cup, I bet you came home and you felt like you were a
100%.
better mom,
Yeah,
wife, and all
yeah,
these other things, right?
yeah. No, I feel like my whole body was like, you need this right now. It had been, and you know, I'm
Yeah.
different too. Like in Canada, we usually take like between 12 and 18 months maternity leave. Anybody that's listening is gonna be like, what? Because I know in the States, like I have friends and it's like you go back after 12 weeks. So it's very
Yeah.
different here. And so when you think about that amount of time that you are pouring into another human being, there are so many benefits. But then also the downside is like you lose a lot of yourself and your identity. And so being able to meet myself again, I remember like being in California after I did a whole day of recording and just putting my feet into the sand and being like, I'm here and I'm here for myself. I'm doing this for me.
Oh,
And I just
love it.
there was something that just felt so energizing. And like you're saying, as soon as I came back home, I was like so much more able to be present for my daughter and like reconnect with my husband and all of that stuff. So I think there has to be a balance for moms for sure.
I agree. And I love you. So when you talked about your feet in the sand, I just
Hmm.
had a memory that I'll share. But, you know, self love and self care can be that simple. I think
It
we
really is.
overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
We think we have to book a day at the spa or this or that. But I remember one week I was on the Atlantic coast and I was like, oh, I want to put my toes in the Atlantic. And the same week I was on the Pacific coast and I put my toes in the
Love
Pacific.
that.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this is cool. This may never happen in my life
Yeah.
again. And that's such a strong memory and it seems so simple and like
It's
really
simple.
just taking time to do those things, to put your feet in the sand
Yes.
and like really just honor what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
I love it.
I love it.
I mean, also going to Target without a toddler and just being able to browse. I don't know if any moms are listening, but like my mom friends back home are like, you are living our dream right now. Like it was just the most amazing. I went to Trader Joe's without a screaming toddler. It was fantastic. That is self care to the max.
That's hilarious. I don't have kids, but I hear that from my girlfriends. I had one friend who had twins and she's like, I could never leave the house because I couldn't
Yeah,
take when they were babies to have two babies. It was
too
like a
much.
nightmare, right?
It
Like you
takes like an
couldn't
hour to
do
leave
it.
that. Like just being able to go out your door, heavenly. It's wonderful.
That's so funny. That reminds me of when I moved back from Europe, from Italy, and I actually had a driveway. And I was like, oh, I get to park in the driveway and just carry my groceries from here to there.
Right?
Because, in
Yes.
Milan, I'm like walking 10 blocks with my
Mm-hmm.
groceries.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's these little things
Little
we take
things.
for granted. So here's
100%.
the challenge to our audience: pay attention today. What are the little things that you should be grateful for?
Mm.
And just think about them and dwell on them. So,
Mm-hmm.
Michaela, I'd love to I want to honor your time. So, real quickly, what color would your femininity be? Or what is
I
it?
think it's probably blue. I think I
Nice.
have blue like that's already in my room here, but like that for me has always been really calming. I'm a Pisces, so I'm a water baby through and through, and there's
Mm-hmm.
just something about water and just kind of like stopping and paying attention to the water is like something that like has always really like resonated with me. And going back to dipping your toes in the sand,
Yeah.
listening to the sound of water, there's just something that like really fills my cup about it.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. So I know that you have a free resource,
Hmm.
100 post ideas for LinkedIn. So again, if you're listening, you definitely want to get your hands on this. If you go to the vixengathering.com, head to our podcast page, and you will have full show notes, transcript, all the amazing resources, and you will also have all the ways that you can get in touch with Michaela. So I highly recommend you do that. And by the way, when you're there, go ahead and subscribe, and all of this gets sent automatically to you in your inbox every week from our episodes. So you definitely want to catch that. As you've heard, there's so many amazing resources. And Michaela, I'd like to wrap up here just sharing a quick message. I always just say the world needs a lot more love. So how are you going to show up in love today? If you had a message for our audience, what would you like to share?
Oh, that's a good question. I always, my tagline has always been love and coffee. And the reason that it is love and coffee is that I think
Yeah.
that, for me at least, it's so important to honor both the professional and then the personal. So the professional is the coffee, the love is the personal, and bringing both to the table and remembering who you are and that who you are is so much more important than what you do, I think is really valuable. So if you are showing up today, tomorrow, or any other day, just be thankful that you're showing up and you're bringing your best self. And yeah, I just think it's really important to have both of those to be able to live a beautiful life.
I love that. So you just gave me goosebumps because I've been struggling between healing and coaching and then like remembering to live my life as well. And actually my spiritual coach this week was like, April, you have a life. Like you don't have to be serving all the time, right?
Yeah.
Which is funny because I used to be like the fun girl, the FOMO girl, and like, didn't want to miss out. And now I'm like, the opposite. So trying to get that balance.
The
So I'm
balance
going
is
to tell
always a
myself,
challenge. Yep.
it is. I'm going to tell myself love and coffee because I love
Love and
coffee
coffee.
too. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just love and coffee when I'm in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. Thank you. Awesome. Well, Michaela, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And it's just awesome to connect with you
I know.
again.
I could talk to you all day long. It's crazy. But I hopeful that like some of these had like little golden nuggets because it certainly did for me even.
Yes.
So it would
Oh my
surprise
gosh.
me.
Yes, for you, those of you listening, you did not see all the notes I took during this. So if you're in the car driving, listening, you're probably going to want to re-listen or go grab that full transcript so you don't miss any of these nuggets. So much tactical information on how to get ahead in LinkedIn, and so much of just, Michaela sharing her journey and things she's been through that are inspiring. And also let us know we're not alone. I just want you to know you're not alone. Tune in every week. We're here twice a week. We're here for you. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on social or subscribe to our newsletter. We'd love to welcome you into our Vixen community. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Remember love and coffee, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Thanks for having
Thanks, Michaela.